What's up, brothers? Hope everyone's doing well out there. So I've got a good video for you today and also a bad video. It depends on how you take it. But what I want to talk about is why most modern women will never be happy in a relationship. And it's true. It's a true subject, and if you're a guy out there that finds yourself in a position where you're experiencing anything like a woman pulling back, being hot and cold, she sees you as a maybe guy, a backup plan, that means that she's not happy with the relationship that you're providing her. And it's not necessarily your fault. I'm sure if you could snap your finger, you would want her to be happy. But the truth is, most modern women are unhappy in their relationships. Now, here's what you need to understand. Based on where I'm sitting and having the opportunity to hear the opinions of all these many thousands of people, there's 4 separate categories, and you're going to be in one of these categories whether you like it or not, whether you realize it or not. And it's important to understand this, because once you understand this and you can identify what's in front of you, it's kind of a game changer. Now, category number 1 is men that chase women. Okay, now this one's self-explanatory. Men that chase women have no self-awareness. We don't have to spend a lot of time talking about these guys because they're just not aware of what's going on in front of them. Category number 2 is men that women chase. Okay, we're going to spend the majority of this video talking about that subject. And that one's both good and bad. We're going to get into that. Category number 3 is, kind of these natural people, the women that like to be pursued and men that like to pursue women. We'll get into that as well. And then we have category number 4, which is people that have just given up. Both men and women, they've given up. They're done with it. And we'll get into that as well. So anyways, the men that chase women, as I said, these are guys with no self-awareness, and I think we all know what their problem is. They just don't see it. They don't even realize what's going on. So we're going to leave them behind in this video and move on to category number 2, which is the men that women chase. Now, this is a bad situation for the majority of society, and I'm going to explain why. You hear things like, why do women prefer bad boys over nice guys? Or some people will use terms like licking the ice cream. A guy has essentially ruined a woman. He's turned her out. Now, this is true, and it's something that takes place, and a lot of people don't seem to be paying attention to. But it's one of those situations where you kind of just have to never let the devil get a foothold, because once he does, it's over with. Now, the reason why women are drawn to bad boys and addicted to bad boys is for one simple reason. And that's because he introduces her to a certain type of lifestyle that is exotic, and it can't be replicated by a basic guy. So here's what I mean. You can have a good woman, a good 19, 20-year-old woman who takes care of herself. Maybe she's moderate, conservative, not super promiscuous, not really out there trying to sleep around or look sexy. Just a normal, attractive, good head on her shoulders kind of woman. And she meets a bad boy. She doesn't realize he's a bad boy. She just finds him attractive and she gets with him. Well, this guy introduces her to a specific lifestyle. It could be wild sex parties. It could have to do with a lot of money or some type of exotic partying. There's something going on, but I want to use the sex party as an example because this will it'll help illustrate the picture better. So let's say this is a girl that's only ever had normal, we'll just say vanilla type of boyfriends, basic type of boyfriends. And she gets with the bad boy and he takes her to a sex party where there's all these, threesomes and foursomes and orgies and costume parties and all kinds of weird things going on. Right? And at first she's like, whoa, I'm not into this, but she's partying, getting messed up, going on Saturday nights. And she begins to become addicted to it because it's an exciting and exotic lifestyle. It's just like kinky, boundary-pushing lifestyle, right? But the bad boy isn't really equipped to have a long-term relationship. He might be with her for 6 months, and then he kind of wants to swap her out with somebody else. Now, the thing is, a woman, and like I said, we can replace sex party with $1 million. A guy introduced her to Bugattis and Ferraris and a famous lifestyle, whatever. You could replace that with 1 million different things, but it has to be some sort of bad boy lifestyle based on lust or greed or something like that, right? But once she's introduced to that lifestyle and she goes back out there in the normal dating market and she meets a regular guy, and this could be a guy that has a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, he's in good shape, good head on his shoulders, the perfect man. Good looking. Well, when she gets with him and she's back in that vanilla lifestyle, she's secretly craving those boundary pushing, exotic environments because the devil already has a foothold. It's similar to a guy that's addicted to porn, or if you're a guy that was, for some reason you were thrust into an environment where you're hooking up with strippers, big booty strippers, every day, threesomes and crazy things. And then suddenly you try to switch over to dating a good conservative woman. You'd be bored to death, right? So the thing about this is the woman that's introduced to that lifestyle and then pushed back into the basic lifestyle. I come across these type of women. Throughout my life, seen them all over the place, right? And it's like these blue-haired women. You might be on Tinder and you see one of these blue-haired girls. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean, right? And you talk to her a little bit and you find out, she's a fast mover. She's looking for a friend with benefits or something. You say, okay, well, let's hear it. Let's hear what's going on. She doesn't quite open up to you until a few days later, and then she's like, oh yeah, there's something I've kept from you. I'm married. And she'll say that he knows everything about it. He's cool with it. And you're like, okay, this is kind of weird. But really, I'm the type of guy I'm going to lose interest. But if you lose interest, she's probably going to start sending you provocative pictures, trying to entice you to become interested again. And really what's happened is she's one of those women that's been introduced to some sort of a kinky lifestyle in the past. And she got thrust back out there in the normal dating market. She found a normal guy, she married him. And she's unhappy in the relationship, so she's going back and she's looking for that kinky excitement, and I don't know, man. Like, to me, it's like, well, I see what's going on here. I can read you like a book. I've seen this 1,000,000 times before, but, count me out. Her husband's like a baseball coach, a solid dude, but just boring. So she talks him into letting her go to these weird sex parties, so she's still kind of hunting down that bad boy that she craves, that she yearns for. That's how she stays happy. She goes out and she finds that man. Now, in modern dating, the amount of women that have experienced that sort of a lifestyle. And again, replace sex party with whatever you want. You know, whatever dark desire type of lifestyle you want to replace it with. But once they've experienced it, it's always there. It's like a man watching porn, as I was saying. Once you've watched it once, it's hard to, the rest of your life, every time you see a laptop, like this dopamine hit strikes your brain. Should I open the laptop and watch porn? Should I search big greasy booties? Whatever it is you're into. It's always there. And then you're always just like the snap of a finger away from giving the devil a foothold. And it kind of sucks because if you've never been introduced to that lifestyle, if you never open your eyes to it, and it's like taking a bite out of the apple, right? If you've never been introduced to it, you don't know it exists and you don't yearn for it. But once you've been introduced to it, you always secretly yearn for it. And that's why they call it licking the ice cream. That's why they call it damaged goods. You know, because, put it like this, if you're a man of God or a father of daughters, you want to protect your women in your life from that. You don't want them to experience that because you want them to grow and be happy mothers and happy members of their families. And, you know, you don't want to see them constantly yearning for that dark fantasy. And I'm not telling you which way you should go or not. You can go whichever direction you want to go. You can take this and say, well, I'm going to learn how to be a bad boy. Or you could say, well, I'm going to just know this stuff exists so I can identify it and move forward properly. But it does exist. You know, keep that in mind. So category number 3, the traditional people, the women that want to be pursued and the men that want to pursue them. This is kind of the natural way. If you live in more of a pure environment, right? If you haven't been introduced to the dark fantasies, the dark side of human nature, and it's fairly natural. You know, you can meet women like this, but let's face it, category number 1 and category number 2 are getting bigger and bigger. Category number 3 is getting smaller and smaller as we progress as human beings. As we move further and further away from our concepts of believing in God and move in this direction of believing in science, you know, and what technology, and that's where we're heading. I find that unfortunate, but it's just the way it is. But when you meet a woman that likes to be pursued, it is a simple process. And this is a woman that talks to one man at a time and a man that talks to one woman at a time. And the excitement is drawn from that person and that person only. You know, whenever when you're wired in a way where you're still innocent, you haven't been corrupted yet. When somebody expresses emotions, when you've been dating a woman and she expresses her emotions to you, it gets you excited. It stimulates your sex drive and your emotions, right? But when you have been corrupted and they express their emotions, you're like, yuck, go away. You know, it rewires the way you think. Even if you're a porn addict, if a woman's telling you she loves you, you're going to be like, yuck, go away. I want a woman that's going to get naked and shake her booty in some lingerie. You know, you rewire your brain, and so do women. But somebody that's not been corrupted yet, it's a very easy process. So if that's what you're looking for a traditional relationship, you have to understand you can't change people. You can only identify what they are and if they're compatible with you. So you go on a few dates, you start to, you know, express emotions towards one another. You consider yourself man and woman, and maybe you get married and you start a family. The percent chance of that taking place is getting smaller and smaller as we progress. But it does exist, happens every day. It's just difficult to find, right? Unfortunately. Now, category number 4, people that have just given up. Okay? A man and a woman who have been fried by categories number 1 and categories number 2. If you're a man that's been chasing women constantly and getting no results, you're just chasing, getting no results because you're competing with category number 2 and you don't even realize it, you're probably going to give up. If you're somebody in category number 2 whose brain has been fried by wild, kinky things and dark desires, and then you find that the dating market is just too boring for you, because that happens too. You either fry yourself, you either have a lack of satisfaction so you give up, or you have an overstimulation and you fry your brain and you give up. A lot of women do that too. You see women in their 30s don't even want a man. You know, they've been through all the wild, crazy things, and they just, I don't know, they've been fried by it and they just want out, right? But that's what we're turning into. You know, we've already been exposed to these things. To be honest, one of the things that stimulated me to make this video was I was watching an old Jason movie, Friday movies. And there was a couple sitting there, and they were, you know, just like an innocent little couple, and this was representative of 1980s culture. There was this real cute woman, you know, young 21-year-old, real cute, not dressed super sexy, but just pretty. And she was flirting with this guy, and they had been, I don't know, they were, I guess, boyfriend and girlfriend in the movie. And she was like smiling at him and giggling, and she's like, "You want to go upstairs?" That's all she said, is, "You want to go upstairs?" No nude, no pornography, nothing like that, no explicit sexual language. But she just had this smile on her face and this look about her, and she asked him if he wanted to go upstairs. And in 1980s, that was so erotic, like that was so sexual, because people hadn't been exposed to pornography. I mean, they had to some degree, but for the most part, most people hadn't seen pornography, unless it was a Playboy, which Playboy is like classy, you know, boob shots and stuff. They hadn't seen hardcore porn yet. So something like that was erotic. You know, now it's like they need some full hardcore, you know, really kinky type of porn in order for them to consider it erotic. And they've been desensitized, you could say. Or even the graphics of a horror movie. You know, back in the 1980s, you know, the slasher would walk up with a weapon, and he would kind of like raise his arm up, and they would make a sound effect, and the screen would go black. And your imagination, you would hear like a splatter. Your imagination would just assume what it looked like. And you would cringe. It was hard to watch, you know. But now they just show people, you know, the most gruesome, brutal scenes possible, because we've been desensitized to it. And they need to keep pushing things more and more hardcore. And it's the same thing in the dating market. You know, once people have been exposed to an exotic lifestyle, they need that exotic lifestyle in order to be fulfilled, to reach the maximum capacity of lust and greed. And the thing about that is, once you become desensitized to all that is wholesome and righteous and good, it sort of prevents you from, you know, having the characteristics that are necessary to be a productive family member. You know, a wholesome parent, you know, a solid person, a good person. You know, the kind of person you would want at your dinner table. It's the direction that we're moving in. It's the way society's going. I know a lot of people feel like something's off because there are still some good people out there. But the bottom line is, we're moving in a weird direction. And you know it. We no longer frown upon those type of behaviors. We just accept them. It's almost like we've just become so non-judgmental that we don't even consider that those things have potentially affected somebody psychologically to a point where they're now in an unhealthy position. But if you were a man out there and you're a rock star and you're experiencing threesomes with hot strippers on a regular basis and all this money and status and these crazy things and gold-plated shower spigots, and that's your life, you wouldn't be able to go back to something normal. Your standards in terms of greed and narcissism and lust have been elevated so high that you can't go back. But I guess, the difference is, for a man to become a rock star, he has to work his ass off and, put tons of effort into becoming that. And once he does become that, he's a rare man, a rare individual. But for women, all they really have to do is be above a 6 out of 10, take good care of themselves, learn how to dress and, do their makeup and whatnot. If a bad boy comes in and swoops them up, spits his game, gets in her ear and seduces her and gets her to come to one of them parties, she can kind of become it. Like I said, man, you see it everywhere you go. And when you can read it, category number 1, the manosphere talks about these guys a lot, these guys that chase women, the simps. It's unfortunate that they are the way they are. And you try to fix them, but they don't know they have a problem. They don't have that self-awareness. And then, category number 2, these desensitized people. Again, they don't want to hear that they have a problem. They don't want you to tell them, like, hey, maybe you should unplug and attempt to reset here. Maybe you should go through some rehabilitation phase and get yourself back to normal. I'll admit, I went through a sex addiction phase. I went through a porn addiction phase. I went through an alcohol addiction phase. All of these strange vices that are so addicting, and they make normal life seem impossible. It's like you can't live without them once you start them. But if you go, I would say, 3 days without them, that's the hardest part. Then you go 3 months without them, and you don't even look back. And you can step back, to live in that life of number 3 and avoid that category number 4. But takes looking at yourself a bit. But the main thing is that category number 2, understanding whether you're a man or a woman, you could be experiencing that. How do we say this? With women, you see these, you hear these phrases like the 1,000-cock stare. A woman that's trapped in category number 2, she's going to have that 1,000-cock stare. You know how people will use these memes where they'll take a female porn star surrounded by like a group of men. You know what I'm talking about. They'll spread these memes all over the place, and you see the look on the girl's face, that 1,000-cock stare. And you see that look in public. And men get it too. It's the male narcissist. I don't believe that men are born narcissists. I think some of them become it based on frying their brain on certain aspects. They could be born that way. I could be wrong. I'm open to being wrong about that part. But I don't know. You know, but a clean lifestyle, drug and alcohol-free lifestyle, crime-free lifestyle, a guilt-free lifestyle, unplugging, getting back in touch with nature, you know, maybe getting back into believing in God, whatever it is that you find that makes you feel wholesome again, that'll get you back. But you have to have the self-awareness to be able to get yourself there. That goes for both men and women. I noticed every time I turn my head, the camera gets a little darker. When I face it, it focuses on me. It's kind of annoying that that takes place, but it does. All right, guys. Suppose that just about covers it. There's probably some things that I'm leaving out, but, you know, as always, we can come back to those things at a later time. I suppose the last thing that I would leave you with is just have self-awareness. Understand that there is a spot that you're at, there is a position that you're in, and understand where you're at and move accordingly. If that requires judging your surroundings, judge your surroundings. If that requires judging yourself and fixing yourself, fix yourself, but look at the situation objectively. I suppose that's about it. Alright guys, hope this video was somewhat informative, and that's about it for today. Until next time, see ya.